This hour on I-24 News.
America first does not mean America alone.
President Trump softens his tone at Davos, selling America's economy instead of scolding U.S. trade rivals. Plus, more attacks by Turkish troops on U.S.-backed Kurds in Syria threaten to put two NATO allies on a collision course. Also, a new report says Hillary Clinton protected a campaign aide accused of sexual harassment, refusing to have him fired. And a violent crime wave sweeps a wealthy country known for being one of the happiest places on the planet.
From the I-24 News studios in Times Square in New York, this is Clear Cut with Michelle McCory.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Tal Heinrich in for Michelle McCory. You have to give President Donald Trump credit. He knows how to play to an audience. President Trump took the stage Friday before global elite at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Mr. Trump delivered a speech pushing his America First policy once again, but this time, instead of lashing out at America's trade rivals, he encouraged world powers to become America's trade partners.
I'm here to deliver a simple message. There has never been a better time to hire, to build, to invest, and to grow in the United States. America is open for business, and we are competitive once again. I will always put America first, just like the leaders of other countries should put their country first also. But America first does not mean America alone. When the United States grows, so does the world.
Now let's bring in senior Washington correspondent Dan Raviv to discuss it further. Dan, you and other reporters said beforehand that Davos is not the kind of place where you would expect to see a populist politician who's opposed to globalization. So how did it all turn out?
Well, it actually turned out pretty well for him. Trump, the first American president to go to the World Economic Forum in Davos in 18 years. Back then, it was the globalist Bill Clinton. Davos every January is filled with elites, the kind who thought that Donald Trump is some kind of barbarian with wacky ideas. But in fact, there are also a lot of business executives there, CEOs who sat around the table with Donald Trump, who praised his tax reform and reaffirmed that they plan to invest billions of dollars in the U.S. Ka-ching! That was a victory for Trump. He was smiling, he was charming, even with the head of the African Union. When Trump sat down with him, apparently Trump's way of trying to make up for the alleged vulgar insult that he said about black African countries. And then there was the serious but short speech on Friday, 16 minutes, in which the president said that America First still can mean that everyone will be prosperous. You'd have to say it was a successful two-day visit, but there was booing and hissing once when he said that he's learned as a politician that the news media can be vicious, nasty, and fake. So that's what Trump said, and some people in the hall disagreed. Tal?
And in this speech, the president was very critical of China, wasn't he? Though without naming China, Dan.
That's so important. China's the big behemoth in the world of trade, and most of the speech was charming and positive. But in Davos, you know, even as Trump called himself a cheerleader, he added that America will stop turning a blind eye to unfair practices such as stealing patents and copyrights, subsidizing certain industries, and this had to be about China, pervasive state-led economic planning. Trump said that's not a free market. He hinted that the United States might impose more tariffs and that there are more difficult, tough trade negotiations ahead. So he went to Davos also to deliver that message. By the way, Trump is back in Washington just a few minutes ago, and a lot of people wonder, the First Lady, Melania Trump, she didn't take the trip to Switzerland. She's in Florida at their Mar-a-Lago estate. We don't know that they plan to spend any time together this weekend. We don't know what's up, if anything. Probably nothing. Tal?
Dan Raviv, thank you so much for this information and all these insights, as always. And the president did not soften his tone when talking about the Palestinian Authority while in Davos. As diplomatic correspondent Mike Wagenheim shows us, it was quite the opposite.
It didn't take long for U.S. President Donald Trump to make his mark in Davos on Thursday, and he made it loud and clear, blasting the Palestinian Authority for its reaction to his recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
The hardest subject they had to talk about was Jerusalem. We took Jerusalem off the table, so we don't have to talk about it anymore. They never got past Jerusalem.
Trump's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum ended with strong condemnation of Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and further threats of cuts of U.S. aid to the PA.
They disrespected us a week ago by not allowing our great vice president to see them, and we give them hundreds of millions of dollars in aid and support. That money is on the table, and that money is not going to them unless they sit down and negotiate peace. Because I can tell you that Israel does want to make peace, and they're going to have to want to make peace too, or we're going to have nothing to do with it any longer.
In a forum later in the afternoon, Netanyahu said his stance on the peace process was clear: PA sovereignty with Israeli security.
I don't want to annex the Palestinians as citizens of Israel, and I don't want to have them as our subjects. They can live in their own sphere, govern themselves with their own powers, their own parliament, their own flag, their own embassies, what have you, the whole trappings, except the powers that are needed, that we need to retain in order to protect ourselves. And this is not a gimmick, it's not a spin.
Of course, it was an economic forum, and Netanyahu put together his best sales pitch for investment in Israel.
We can offer security and food and cleaner water and cleaner air, anything from cherry tomatoes to cybersecurity. You know, it's something of deep pride, and it gives me hope that we can not only help the people around the world, but also help people in our corner of the world.
Thursday's dalliance in Davos appeared to further solidify the strong relationship between Trump and Netanyahu, and now they'll use much of their remaining time there to convince the world that it's in peril unless something is done about the Iran nuclear accord. And that deal has no bigger critics than those two. Mike Wagenheim, I-24 News.
And we continue to break down the president's appearance in Davos in front of the World Economic Forum. This time we have here on set Jonathan Wachtel, former spokesperson, United States mission to the United Nations. Jonathan, what do you think was the main message that the president was hoping to deliver there in front of the crowd in Davos and to the world?
Couple of main messages. The most important message was we're open for business. Invest in the United States. Our economy's strong.
This is the time.
This is it. Go for it. We're doing great. Stock market's way up. We're ready to go. But mind you, we got to work out the negotiations or figure out what's happening with these multilateral trade agreements that are out there that need to be reformed or completely scrapped.
And what do you think about the America First message? How has it been received, or what was the crowd, world leaders, and this economic forum they're expecting to hear from the U.S. president?
There's been this expectation that he's going to say something American-centric, utterly American-centric. And he was conciliatory in his speech. He said, you know, it's America first, like your country first, but America with the other countries. Come and join us and come and invest in our country, and we'll have a great, prosperous future, essentially what he was trying to.
I want to get your personal thoughts on this, because on one hand, the president talks about America first, but on the other hand, at the same speech, he also addressed the topic of immigration, where he said, and I'm quoting, he wants to see an immigration system that selects new arrivals based on their ability to contribute to our economy, support themselves financially, and to strengthen our country. What I don't really get, is there really a contradiction here? I mean, well, let's say there's a European super brilliant software engineer, okay? Who would President Trump like to see in the U.S. taking a certain position? A good enough American employer, or, you know, or employee, or this European?
It's a multifaceted problem here. The United States has such an influx of people, many illegals here, and this need to sort things out and get the immigration policy worked out in some sort of cohesive and productive way so that you don't have a drag on the economy from certain segments of the population. And there is a real concern among the American people about some of the people who are here, aliens who have violent histories and other issues that have come up. And of course that comes up in the forefront and becomes a central issue.
So the president wants positive immigration, but not too positive, because then it will take away from Americans' jobs.
You want people who come into this country and actually contribute to the country, are not dragging on the economy, or worse, actually causing harm within the society here. That's what he's advocating.
Mm-hmm. And the president also got some boos at a certain point of his Q&A after his speech. What do you think about that? How do you take it as a diplomat, someone who works at the United Nations? What's your personal thought? It's the U.S. president standing there in the economic forum, and then he's booed for speaking about fake news?
It's not the first time a world leader has been in an environment.
But it's the U.S. president.
Of course, it's the U.S. president, but there have been other presidents who have had shoes thrown at them and other things have happened in the past. You know, so you know it sort of happens. Now, of course, President Trump is a lightning rod of discontent for many people around the world. And I don't know who exactly was in the room and booing. I wasn't there, but you know, my understanding is that that happened around the discussion or mention of fake news. So perhaps there were some journalists in the room or others who were quite upset about that particular issue.
Jonathan Wachtel, thank you so much for your insights here. And still ahead on ClearCut, the dangerous new crisis in Syria. The U.S. and another NATO ally inching closer to conflict. You'll hear what a key American general is saying about it. And President Obama defends his record on Israel. Hear what he had to say about it at a prominent New York temple. A dangerous new escalation in northern Syria has already led to hundreds of casualties. Now, Turkey's fight against Kurdish militias is threatening to draw forces from the fight against ISIS. The invasion could potentially lead to a clash between U.S. forces and another NATO ally. Senior defense correspondent Chai Ben-Ari explains.
The crisis in Afrin, Syria rages on. A Turkish military operation to drive Kurdish forces out of the area has already resulted in over 300 deaths. The Turks describe the Kurdish-controlled areas near their border as a terrorist threat to their national security. But the Kurds have also been a key Western ally in battling the Islamic State, doing much of the fighting on the ground. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has been visiting his forces near the Syrian border and had this to say on Friday.
We will continue Operation Olive Branch, which is on its 7th day today, until we reach all our targets. After this, we will cleanse Manbij of terrorists as had been promised to us.
Manbij is a town 60 miles to the east of Afrin. There is a large Kurdish presence there, but these allied U.S. forces are also stationed in the area. Erdogan has personally asked U.S. President Donald Trump to withdraw them to a different location. So far, it appears no decision has been taken.
Either they'll stay or they'll go. Don't know what the answer will be. I would tell you that wherever U.S. troops are, they're going to be able to defend themselves. And we coordinate very closely with the Turks on that. They know where our forces are. There's no mystery about where they're going to be.
The U.S. has urged Turkey to de-escalate the situation and avoid actions that could risk direct conflict between the two countries. But at the moment, it seems the Turks aren't backing down.
We will continue our fight until there are no terrorists left, all the way to the border with Iraq.
Meanwhile, the Kurds are hedging their bets. They've already asked for assistance from the regime of Bashar al-Assad, the same government they are seeking autonomy from. Another bizarre twist in the history of this war-torn country. Chai Ben-Ari, I-24 News.
And as these complicated developments are taking place on the ground in Syria, meanwhile, in Vienna, a fresh round of UN peace talks promises a ceasefire for eastern Ghouta. For more, let's bring in senior diplomatic correspondent Nina Larson at the UN headquarters. Nina, we hear that the ceasefire for Damascus suburb of eastern Ghouta is meant to be in place right now. How did this deal come about, and will the ceasefire be actually held?
Well, that's a good question, Tal. This was all about Moscow exerting their influence, their significant influence on the Syrian regime. That was the one positive thing that came out of these talks in Vienna today that just ended this session. And it's not clear on the ground yet whether the ceasefire has actually been implemented or whether indeed, if it is, it will actually hold. We've seen this kind of routine before. We've seen these ceasefires brokered, and they can fall apart very, very quickly in the realities of the war in Syria. But as you said, a very complex situation with this Turkish offensive, and the Kurds really asking for backup now from Assad's forces, which is another twist in this.
Nina, Russia has its own parallel political track. Peace talks planned for Sochi. Will it actually take place?
Well, I think they're going to have to take place because the invites have gone out. 1,600 delegates have been invited. They're meant to take place on Monday. But, Tal, it's really unclear about who's going to actually show up to these talks. This was meant to be a Congress, they're calling it, of the Syrian opposition. However, the High Negotiations Committee, that's the main opposition group, aren't going. The Syrian Kurds aren't going. They're obviously very busy themselves at the moment on the ground, and many groups are boycotting this. And in the international community, diplomatically, this is seen very much as a Russian attempt to undermine that UN peace track that everybody's backing. And Russia not very popular at the Security Council at the moment in any case over their continuing support for the Assad regime. So yes, the talks will probably happen in some form on Monday and Tuesday in Sochi. But the thing is, Russia cannot be considered any kind of impartial mediator because of its alliance with Assad.
Nina Larson, thank you for this information from the UN headquarters in New York. We're getting more detail about former President Obama and his relationship with Israel. This week, Obama defended his decision on a UN resolution critical of Israeli settlements, Resolution 2334. Now, let's go to our Tel Aviv headquarters to break it down with I-24 News correspondent Sarah Coates. Sarah, what do we know about the former president's comments?
Well, Tal, the main point Obama made is that he believes that Israeli settlement construction has gone too far, making a Palestinian state unviable, and therefore the US had to abstain from that resolution, not just in Israel's interests, but also in order to retain America's credibility. Obama also said that being a true friend to Israel meant being honest, even when it's difficult to do so. And Tal, as you can remember, this UN vote was, of course, extremely painful for Israel, described by many here as a stab in the back. And interestingly, in this speech, Obama identified himself as basically a liberal Jew, which suggests perhaps that many liberal Jews would agree with his move.
And on the same stage in the synagogue, Obama defended his support for the Israeli military. What did he have to say about that?
Yeah, that's right. He said that he gave greater support to the Israeli military than any other US administration has. And the numbers definitely support that, with an enhanced military aid package signed off by Obama at the end of 2016 toward the end of his term. Now, that was worth $38 billion over a 10-year period, compared to the $30 billion package signed under President Bush back in 2007. So Obama also boasted that intelligence and military cooperation with Israel had never been closer than under his administration, something that many Israeli officials have acknowledged in recent years. But despite this, Tal, many in Israel feel that Obama let them down in the more important diplomatic arena, especially by abstaining from that UN resolution you mentioned earlier.
Sarah Coates, live from our Tel Aviv headquarters. Thank you, and happy Australia Day, by the way.
Thank you.
There's a troubling new report amid the Me Too movement coming up, how Hillary Clinton may have protected a campaign aide who was accused of sexual harassment. And the president and the special counsel, what President Trump is saying about the reports he tried to fire Robert Mueller. A new report of sexual harassment at the senior levels of Hillary Clinton campaign a decade ago. A report says the senior advisor to Clinton was accused of harassment but was kept on staff at the urging of the candidate herself. Our New York bureau chief, Steve Langford, has the details.
I'm Bern Strider, a native of Grenada, Mississippi.
He was a senior advisor to Hillary Clinton, her director of faith outreach in 2008, after serving as a senior advisor to Nancy Pelosi.
Thank y'all. I'm glad to be here.
Hillary Clinton kept Bern Strider on her campaign staff a decade ago, despite repeated incidents of alleged sexual harassment, according to the New York Times, which reports a young woman who shared an office with Strider accused him of rubbing her shoulders, kissing her forehead, and sending a series of suggestive emails.
Washington, D.C. can be a tough place to practically engage in your faith.
Clinton campaign manager Patty Solis Doyle wanted Strider fired, according to the Times, but Clinton reportedly rejected that advice, requesting instead that Strider seek counseling and lose several weeks of pay.
Sometimes you just stop and inhale it. Just take it in, you know, and let God do with you what he wants.
Bern Strider later worked for a pro-Clinton group called Correct the Record, but was fired there after accusations he harassed a young female aide, the Times reports.
Community can make us think of a safe togetherness, shared meals, common goals, joyful celebrations.
During one of the Clinton campaigns, the Times says, Bern Strider sent the candidate scripture readings every morning for several months. In New York, Steve Langford, I-24 News.
For more, let's bring in senior national correspondent Michael Shore. Michael, have there been any official comments to this story from Hillary Clinton or something on her behalf?
No, there's been nothing on her behalf. Her legal team, Tal, has said that they went through the proper channels. Everything was done properly in 2008 when Strider was let go from the campaign and when the reassignment of his accuser happened. But they did not say anything about today's release of information by the New York Times. I checked also with the White House. I got no response as to whether or not they had a comment on this. I didn't expect them to respond either, but they gave no response as well.
Michael, President Trump is probably now thinking, how come this new piece of information hasn't gone public during the presidential campaign back in 2016? And Republicans are probably also feeling, well, that's a bipartisan issue.
Yeah, they are. I don't know what the president would be thinking in this case, Tal. You have to remember the Republican campaign at that time was deflecting some of their own sexual harassment cases themselves that were dealing directly with their candidate. This is dealing with somebody who wasn't even part in 2016 of the campaign. Up until a certain point, he was working for an entirely different group with David Brock there. So I don't know that would be the same sort of thing, though they probably would have an argument, oh, the press covered something up. But I think in the wake of the Stormy Daniels conversation that we've been having over the past week with the press covering things up, that it may fall on false ears. But of course, there's probably a little bit of a frustration that this story didn't come out earlier. Trump would say we didn't need it to win, I would bet.
Right. Michael, maybe you have an answer to this question. Where is Hillary Clinton now? We haven't heard much from her lately.
No, I'm looking around. I see her. I see her nowhere here, Tal. She did do her book tour. She wrote the book, toured the book. She has her Onward Together group that is part of sort of an outcropping of her campaign. She's been commenting a lot on the president, commenting a lot about the Me Too movement, which makes some of the things that we've heard today from the Times story a little bit revealing, because she has been outspoken against Harvey Weinstein. She was, told that she had to be, and she also was asked for comment constantly because of her close associations as a candidate and as a politician with Weinstein. Now, though, it seems that over the past sort of short time since she wrote the book, she's been taking a little bit of a break, probably going to come back out with her Onward Together as the 2018 races go forward, from what somebody at the Democratic National Committee told me today.
Let's move on to the bombshell from the New York Times saying President Trump tried to fire special counsel Robert Mueller last summer. The Times saying the White House lawyer threatened to quit and the president didn't go through with it. Michael, what do you make of this?
Well, again, it's the big story that didn't happen, but just the fact that it was being talked about, that the president, who assured so many that he had no intentions of firing the independent counsel, asked for it, wanted it, and then was threatened by Don McGahn, a longtime associate of Donald Trump, both his family and McGahn himself. Didn't want to see that happen. And there was the Saturday night massacre that happened to Richard Nixon. The Trump White House was very nervous that that was the sort of thing where they fired an independent counsel, an independent prosecutor, the same way that Richard Nixon did. To see that happen again was not what Don McGahn wanted, did not want to be a part of a White House that did that. It does indicate a fear on the behalf of the president that this investigation, whether justified in his eyes or not, is going in a direction that does not affect him very well, Tal.
So what is the White House response so far?
Well, the White House response has been that, you know, what Sarah Sanders has said. They haven't denied this. They haven't said that it didn't happen. But, in fact, you still see Robert Mueller at the independent counsel's office, and you still see Don McGahn as the White House lawyer. So by not responding, they're saying, listen, we didn't do it. The president didn't fire him, and there we go. So onward from here.
Senior national correspondent Michael Shore, thank you so much for your time today. And still ahead, Eye in the Sky, Israel's new military drone and how it could help on the battlefield. Plus, how Burger King used the Whopper to explain net neutrality. We'll show you their new ad that's going viral online. But first, the latest headlines from our headquarters in Tel Aviv. A live look at the Nasdaq building here in Times Square. It was another record-breaking day on Wall Street. The Nasdaq gaining 1.25%, the Dow rising more than 0.8%, and the S&P climbing more than 1%, all three closing at new record highs. Burger King is getting a lot of attention for explaining a very complicated hot-button issue. We're talking about net neutrality, and if you don't think burgers can teach people about net neutrality, well, take a look.
You got the Whopper? Yeah. So you got the slow access Whopper pass? Wait, what? It's on the menu right there with the fast, medium, and slow. Slow MBPS, fast MBPS, or hyper-fast MBPS. MBPS, of course, standing for making burgers per second.
So if we want a Whopper now, we have to pay $26?
Well, that's how you get it fast. That's the highest priority. This is like a lane system? It's gonna be like 15, yeah, fast lane, slow lane. So like maybe like 15, 20 minutes.
What are you talking about?
Burger King's global chief marketing officer says the company believes the internet should be like Burger King restaurants, a place that doesn't prioritize. Now, joining me here to discuss it further is Jeannie Zaino. She is professor of political science at Iona College. Now, let's begin with explaining this very complicated issue, because the Burger King ad, it does a very good job at explaining it, but we didn't show entirely what it says. What is net neutrality? Why is it being so highly debated right now?
Yeah, and it's fascinating because that's one of the things this ad tries to do, is teach people, because there's so much confusion out there as to what exactly this means, but we hear the term a lot. So net neutrality is like the First Amendment of the internet. It's the idea that regardless of what the information is and where it's coming from, it should be equally accessible to everybody. And the repeal of net neutrality, which we've just seen under the Trump administration, means that if you can pay more for information, you're going to get it faster. And those people who can't are going to be put in this slow lane, hence this Whopper issue that they're talking about with Burger King.
So who is basically interested in deregulating the Whopper? Let's continue to talk about it with the Burger King example.
Well, Ajit Pai, the new FCC chairman, the Trump administration, many people feel you should let the market determine if, you know, it should be a free market system. And so let the market decide. If they can pay more, then the information is going to come faster. And so that's where we've seen, very much in keeping with what the Trump administration has done with deregulation across the board. During the campaign, President Trump said, I will continue to deregulate and push back the Obama-era regulations in all areas.
Well, he said for every new regulation, he will deregulate 2 other existing regulations.
And he's done that. I mean, he's done a magnificent job in that area. And if you are a supporter of that, you've got to be very happy, more than he promised on the campaign trail. This is one example of deregulation, because net neutrality came into being under the Obama administration, and now they've been able to pull it back.
But why are we treating the internet like this commodity, maybe like even air or water, something that everyone should have access to? I mean, because other products, it just makes sense. The more you pay, the better service or the better product you get. So why not internet?
The argument here is that it's very much like electricity. It's very much, as you mentioned, like water, something that everybody has a right to. So I work at an educational institution, not the most exciting information coming out of an educational institution, but do we want our students to have slower access to information just because it's not quite as popular? Or even news information, you know, fake news may get pushed faster because it's more interesting, more titillating than,
but the
say,
competition will be out there, and there will be lower prices as well. This is what someone else would say.
And exactly, and that's the other argument, is that let the market decide. And of course, what Ajit Pai has said is this will increase competition, and we will see more innovation, which has been slowed to a certain extent, the argument is, under this increased government regulation.
Where do big companies like Google and Apple, for example, stand on this matter?
Well, they have come out for the most part, and they have been in favor of net neutrality. And this is why I think Burger King is jumping on this, because it's something that's very popular with the American public, is that there should be net neutrality. So you see the big companies coming out. You know, Burger King, it's interesting. Are they really going to win or lose net neutrality or not? Not really. But they've won with this ad because it's been so incredibly funny and popular.
I want to ask you something a bit personal. What do you think about this phenomena that American companies that are unnecessarily related to certain fields are making these social and political statements?
It's fascinating. And you know, again, if Burger King, it's fascinating because they don't really have a stake in the game. It's not going to impact the sales of burgers one way or the other.
They have a burger in the game.
That's right. So it's fascinating that they're taking a stand on a social issue, and that can be dangerous as well, because if it's something that becomes incredibly controversial, they could be on the losing side. But in this case, they're going with the polls, which say net neutrality is really popular with the American public, and they've put a stake in that.
I think we need a burger more than we need internet right now. Thank you so much for this, Jeannie Zaino, professor from Iona College. Thank you. Israel has a new military drone that's gaining importance on the battlefield. It's called the Skylark. One of the things that makes it so special is the way it's tossed into the sky. Senior defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari has more.
Meet the Skylark, the Israeli Army's eye in the sky. It's a small drone developed by Elbit Systems that is literally thrown into the air. Controlled by a soldier on the ground, the unmanned aerial vehicle films images from its unique vantage point and feeds them back to a team that can view the footage on a screen, even in the middle of a battlefield. The Skylark can perform a range of functions, from assisting routine border security missions to providing critical intel to a commando force deployed behind enemy lines. It can also help direct air and artillery strikes. This footage was shot by a Skylark drone flying over Syrian territory. The UAV pinpointed Syrian army positions that were hit by the IDF in retaliation for mortars falling on Israel's side of the Golan Heights. A Skylark team consists of 4 soldiers and a commander, who usually carry the drone parts in special backpacks. The craft is assembled in the field shortly before use. The Skylark unit consists of 20 such teams, and it is currently commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Rode Rettig Weiss. The unit has also begun incorporating teams of female soldiers.
The difference between the male and female soldiers is that the females are more mobile in combat, as their drones are carried on armored vehicles. That is really the main difference. The female soldiers participate in combat in both routine and emergency scenarios, crossing enemy lines and doing everything that's needed together with the male teams.
Over the years, there have been numerous cases of Skylark drones dropping out of the skies during flight. Some have even fallen inside the Gaza Strip and in Lebanese territory. Most of these incidents have been linked to simple wear and tear, and in some cases human error. The fact that no information is stored on the craft, as well as the low cost of production, means these cases aren't seen as major incidents. Still, improvements to the system have led to fewer falling Skylarks in recent months. even as flight hours go up by an average of some 1,000 hours per year. New upgrades are also expected to allow longer flight times, as well as the use of a camera that can operate during both day and night missions, meaning someone is always watching. Shai Ben-Ari, I-24 News.
Still ahead on CLEARCUT, crime wave. What's behind the spike in violence in Sweden and what the government plans to do about it? And a supermarket brawl over Nutella. What sent shoppers in France into a craze? Sweden, one of the richest countries in the world and ranked as one of the happiest nations in the world, is trying to combat a dramatic surge in gun violence. The situation is so bad, Sweden's Prime Minister Stefan Löfven says he will do whatever it takes, including sending the army into the streets to end the bloodshed. I-24 News correspondent Marcus White has the story.
January 17th, 2018. Police stand guard with weapons drawn after a suspected grenade attack at a police station in Malmö, Sweden's third largest city. One man was killed. A week earlier in the Stockholm metro area, one person died after picking up what sources say was a hand grenade outside of a transit station. Investigators don't believe the incident was terror-related. The violence is so concerning, Sweden's Prime Minister Stefan Löfven wants members of the military deployed on urban streets to try and end the bloodshed. Swedes say it's not out of the ordinary to hear about grenade attacks, turf wars, and revenge killings.
This kind of things is a surprise because we don't have it anymore normally.
The Times of London cites statistics showing more than 320 shootings in Sweden in 2017, many of them in larger cities, 110 murders. Sweden has a population of nearly 10 million people, also more than 7,200 rapes, an increase of 10% compared to 2016, and police haven't been immediately investigating rapes because they're focused on gang violence.
I had some accidents in the 90s and in the beginning of this millennia. But it was really bad gangs that was around here.
In the streets of Malmö, there are reports of delinquent children as young as 14 wandering the streets with assault rifles that look just like this and bulletproof vests. Some say much of the crime happens in areas known as immigrant-dominated ghettos, but others argue immigrants are not responsible for the surge in violence. They say crime happens in poor areas where many immigrants live. Jenik Radin is an adjunct professor of international relations at Columbia University in New York.
Unfortunately, there has been an increase in anti-Muslim sentiment. Everything from, whether it's from Iraq, Syria, Somalia, in that sense they classify them as Muslim.
Radin believes better integrating immigrants into society could help reduce crime.
If you tell me you don't like me because I'm Muslim or I look different, then I'm going to react, unfortunately.
Hoping to cut down on the violence, Sweden's government pledged an extra $880 million through 2020 to step up policing. They also strengthened gun laws.
Do you think putting members of the military out on the streets is a solution?
No. Absolutely not. Crime should be done by police because police, by definition, frequently try to integrate themselves with the community, get to know the community. Military are always going to be a little bit more hard-nosed.
But whatever the solution, there's hope in Sweden that this troubling crime trend will turn around.
I-24 News correspondent Marcus White joins us now to break down this terrific piece. By the way, Marcus, the professor that you interviewed there in this package, he mentioned anti-Muslim sentiment as the reason for some of the crime, but I think it's like the chicken and the egg. What comes first? It's like a cycle, right?
A very vicious cycle. There are estimates that 15% of the population in Sweden are immigrants, and there was a horrific incident that happened last year where there was an immigrant that drove a truck and ended up injuring some individuals. Well, then there becomes anti-Muslim sentiment, and then sometimes authorities say that after some of these incidents, then there's revenge attacks after that. So that's one of the reasons why the violence continues to increase in Sweden.
And where is most of the violence taking place there?
So most of the violence is in the larger cities, Stockholm and a couple of other areas, but there are some individuals that live in the countryside that are really fearful because could you imagine if you live in the countryside and police are worried about gang violence and you call about a break-in, well, perhaps it's going to take them a little while to get to your house for a break-in. So there are other people that are really fearful, and it's kind of interesting to know that this is one of the wealthiest nations in the world with stable levels of unemployment, and you think about that in this level of crime, and there just seems to be a major disconnect.
And Marcus, you also mentioned a few grenade attacks there, just briefly. Grenades in Sweden?
A large number of grenade attacks. The grenades were left over from the Civil War era. Authorities say that there are about 50 of them a year.
Thank you for clarifying that, Marcus White. Thank you so much for reporting. And still ahead, a unique way to remember the Holocaust, a new display at Israel's Holocaust Museum that looks at photography and memory. This weekend, the world marks Holocaust Remembrance Day in Israel. A new exhibit is opening at Yad Vashem Museum that looks at photographs and films from the Holocaust. The exhibit asks what the relationship is between a picture, a memory, and history. Our Maya Margit attended the opening.
Photography, film, and history. How does a picture form our understanding of history? How do images shape collective memory? An exhibition is hoping to answer those questions by asking viewers to see beyond the picture to the person holding the camera. Ahead of International Holocaust Day, Israel's National Holocaust Memorial, the Yad Vashem Museum, has launched a new exhibition called Flashes of Memory. What's interesting here is that, first of all, there are thousands of pictures, thousands of photographs, but it also features many different perspectives from the Second World War. On one side, snapshots by German soldiers, used for propaganda purposes or other personal reasons. On the other, photos Jews shot in secret in the ghettos as they were officially forbidden to own a camera. So these pictures were an act of defiance.
What we want to do in this unique exhibition is to go backward and to look through the eye of the photographer and the mind of the editor that dealt with those photographs.
The final section of the exhibit looks at pictures and films shot by the Allied forces following the liberation of the Nazi death camps. Tomi Shacham, who survived Auschwitz, was separated from his parents during the war and is featured in one of them. He was just 10.5 years old when the Soviet army liberated the camp. Shacham remembers when the Russians photographed him along with other survivors in Auschwitz. He also recalls how hard it was to reunite with loved ones afterwards.
I went to Budapest after the war. I found out what street my relatives were on, knocked on the door, and saw my uncle. It was a very happy moment. He told me my brother died in a ghetto. I had no news of my mother. After a month or so living there, it was July 1st, my birthday. I was turning 11. I was playing in the garden when I heard someone call me to come inside the house. I was sure there was a surprise birthday party waiting for me. I went upstairs, and who do I see? My mother. Even today, I'm moved when I think about it. My mother remembered it was my birthday and came.
The exhibition underlines the important connection between visual documentation and how we view the Holocaust.
The camera has a great manipulative power. The photographs pretends to reflect reality as it is. In fact, it is a kind of interpretation of it.
The message? Photography and film may be powerful, but ultimately, no image is innocent. Reporting from Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, Maya Margit, I-24 News.
And as we wrap up the show, let's take a look at some headlines from around the globe in our World Wrap. In South Korea, a fire at a hospital killed at least 37 people. Firefighters say the blaze started in the emergency room and quickly spread through the first floor. It's South Korea's deadliest fire in almost a decade. In France, the Seine River continues to rise. Parts of Paris and its suburbs have been flooded. Tourists and locals have been advised to stay clear of the banks. The river is expected to peak over the weekend. In French Guiana, NASA launched a new mission to study the edge of space. NASA scientists hope to learn more about the upper atmosphere and the border of space itself. And also, this happened. Brawls broke across France over Nutella. Yes, check out this video from a supermarket in Toulon. The Intermarché store launched a 70% discount on the tasty treat. Customers pushed and shopped to get their hands on the jars. It's the kind of behavior that's reserved for Black Friday here in the States. Well, Nutella says the supermarket chain decided to put on the sale without their knowledge, but they got it viral, right? And that is all from ClearCut for today. I'm Heinrich Michelle McCory. We'll be back here next week. In the meantime, you can also engage in a conversation on Twitter and Facebook. Have a lovely weekend.